Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. On today's episode, we are going to be doing the latest edition of State of the Lakers, 10 storylines every 10 games. So now we are doing our 20-game check-in. Before we get into it, just a quick shout out to the chat. Appreciate you guys' patience. Shout out to the late night gang. I do have a hard out at around 7:30 because we're going to be recording an episode of the Great Western Forum tonight with Pete and Anthony. So I will be going a little over an hour. So let's just get straight into it. I want to start with the vitals for the Lakers. They are 6th in offense right now, 18th in defense, 13th in net rating, 15-5 record, number 2 in the Western Conference, and on a 62 win pace, which is obviously a very high number. Storyline number 1 for me is just that up to this point in the season, we are officially at the quarter mark of the season, give or take a game, and the Lakers are 15-5 and number 2 in the West. And I understand there's a lot of frustration right now coming off of a very disappointing and frankly embarrassing loss to the Phoenix Suns last night. But the Lakers have the second best record in the West. And at worst, at the absolute worst, if you want to be the ultimate pessimist, the ultimate negative Nancy here, they are the 4th best team in the West at worst, right? I think you can clearly OKC is in their own tier. And then if you wanted to argue for Denver and Houston, despite having worse records than the Lakers, have much stronger net ratings and point differentials, don't have as many double-digit losses, don't have as many concerning losses. Okay, you could argue for Denver and Houston at the same tier or slightly above the Lakers. But at worst, the Lakers are the 4th best team in the NBA, or in the West rather, although I think the top 4 teams in the West are the 4 best teams in the NBA. But at worst, the 4th best team in the West up to this point in the season. And you could argue as high as number 2, somewhere in that 2 to 4 range in the West. So that is very encouraging. And again, there have been some disappointing losses. The OKC loss, the Phoenix loss, the Atlanta loss. They have lost all 5 games by double figures, 4 of the 5 by 14 or more. So, I would classify 4 of those as blowouts, but that aside, the Lakers have had an encouraging start to the season, and they look like a team that's likely going to win at least in the mid-50s. Like, I think as the schedule gets harder, that win pace will drop a little bit, but this is a group that right now I would probably peg somewhere in like the 54 to 56 win range, and that is a win, I think, based on the expectations going into the season. They have an MVP candidate and first-team All-NBA guy in Luka. They have Austin, who looks like an all-star lock right now, and third-team All-NBA guy, maybe even second-team, but probably third, but with at least how he's performing right now. Then you still have LeBron, who is working his way back, and we're going to touch on LeBron and the acclimation process, but I think that is something that if he can get back to his level from last season or relatively close to that, that is a player who will raise the Lakers' ceiling and floor. They also have the assets to make a move. They have a future first, a future second, multiple pick swaps, multiple expiring contracts in the form of Rui Hachimura, Gabe Vincent, and Maxi Kleber, and then also a couple of young prospects in Adu Thero and Dalton Connect. So they have some assets to go out and upgrade the roster if necessary. I do think it's necessary, but we will touch on that a little bit later. But still, like, the Lakers are in a really good spot. They have banked wins. They have taken care of business. They've largely beaten the teams they're supposed to. They have some nice wins on the season against San Antonio, Minnesota twice, Miami. They've had some really nice stretches, a couple of win streaks, including most recently the 7-game win streak. And so I say all this just to lay out, I want to start this show on an optimistic note, because I know anytime the Lakers lose, and especially when they lose in the fashion that they lost last night, it's going to be doom and gloom. The sky's falling. We're already seeing it today. I called it last night. I was like, tomorrow we're going to wake up and everyone's going to be hammering the Lakers. They're going to be hammering LeBron. It's going to be father time is won. LeBron should retire. He's cooked. All this stuff. That's exactly what has happened today all across social media. And I'm here to take a realistic look at the situation of, is this a perfect team? No. Are they as good as OKC? No. In my opinion, they're not as good as Denver or Houston either, to be completely honest, but they are right there for me in terms of the fourth or fifth best team in the NBA. And for them to show that at the quarter mark of up to this point in the season, I think that has been really promising. They still have a ways to go in terms of just internal development. They have some tweaks to make to the starting group, some tweaks to make to the rotation. LeBron continuing to acclimate. So I think there will be some internal improvement and internal growth. They still have the assets and flexibility to go upgrade the roster. And as this group continues to get more reps together, more continuity, one thing we haven't touched on as much recently has been they've been healthier recently for the most part, other than Marcus and LeBron resting a little bit. But this was a group that was very banged up for the first 14, 15 games of the season. So yes, the last 5-6 games, they've been a bit healthier, but they lost out on some continuity and reps that they should have had in training camp preseason, to start the season. So as this group starts to crystallize and figure out their scheme on both sides of the ball, the rotation, the lineups, all that stuff, I think they're only going to improve. And that's without potentially making a move, but they still have that flexibility to make a move. So just wanted to come on here and say the sky is not falling for the Lakers. Now, we will learn a lot about them on this upcoming East Coast road swing. They got at Toronto, at Boston, second night of a back-to-back, and then at Philly. Then they come back home and play San Antonio in the NBA Cup quarterfinals. Rematch there from a game about almost a month ago. That was a really fun, high-level game between the Lakers and Spurs. Then they get a rematch against either OKC or Phoenix, the two teams that have compromised LA's offense the most through the first 20 games. So whether they beat the Spurs and advance to the semifinals and face one of those two teams, or they lose to the Spurs and go to the consolation bracket and face one of those two teams, they're going to get another crack at San Antonio, likely at full strength. Then they're also going to get another crack at OKC or Phoenix, and an ability, or an opportunity rather, to exact some revenge. So the Lakers have been one of the better stories in the NBA to start the season. They have been one of the bigger surprises. A lot of people remember had them 6, 7, 8 seed, and they have proven a lot of the NBA media and fans and whatnot wrong in terms of how good they have been in their start. So they are a very good team who has a real shot to make noise in the playoffs. They just need to do some tweaking, I think, with the starting group, a little bit of the rotation, some of the schematic stuff, and then I think likely make a trade at some point. But most teams need to make a trade or have some sort of weakness that they need to figure out how to shore up. So I think the Lakers are in a really good spot 20 games into the season. Storyline number 2 for me is going to be LeBron's return and we'll say rocky acclimation process up to this point. So LeBron returned a couple weeks ago on the 18th, and he has played in 5 games. The Lakers are 4-1 over that stretch, but the only team they played that is above 500 was the Suns, who they played last night, and they ended up losing that game. So they're 4-0 against teams below 500 with LeBron, 0-1 against teams above 500 with LeBron. And when we pull up LeBron's numbers here, I think the first thing that stands out to me is how uninvolved he has been offensively. He's averaging 15 points a game, attempting fewer than 13 shots per game, which is, that's by far a career low for LeBron here. His usage percentage is just over 20%, which basically puts him at role player status in terms of how involved he's been in the offense. And it depends where you look. On Basketball Reference, he's at 22%. NBA.com, he's a little over 20%. So that's by far a career low for LeBron. And then the 3-point shot has not been falling at the rate it has the last couple of years. I think that's something that's going to bounce back. He's shooting 32% on 4.5 attempts per game. Last year, for reference, he shot 38%. The year before, 41%. So averaging 7 assists per game. So that's in line. Last couple of years at 8. A couple of years before then was at 7, 6, then 8. So he's often going to be in that 7 to 8 assist range. Only 4 rebounds per game. That's also a bit of a troubling number for LeBron. Like his previous career low in rebounds is 5.5 his rookie year. Ever since then, he's always been at 6 rebounds or more. So with LeBron, I think the Lakers clearly have not figured out the optimal way to use him. If you look at his first game back, it was a high playmaking game, and he was just kind of feeling it out, not really being aggressive and assertive offensively. And it worked because they were playing the Jazz, and the first couple games were against the Jazz. But since then, he had the game against Dallas where I thought that was probably the best he has looked offensively, and also had some nice moments against the Clippers. But he clearly is not himself right now. It was the Clippers game where he probably looked his best offensively, had 25, 6 and 6 in that game. The Dallas game, 13, 5 and 7. Though I thought he had some nice moments in the Dallas game offensively, had some big buckets late. But the Clippers game was the game where he looked more like himself, 9 to 15 shooting, hit a couple threes, got to the free throw line. So that's probably his best overall game up to this point. But I think the thing we have to remember, and something I brought up last night with LeBron, was last season, the first month of the season was relatively rough for LeBron. And I remember I came on here and there was a post-game reaction where I did pose the question, like, has Father Time caught up to LeBron, or is he just at a different phase of his career? And we were having these conversations about a year ago with LeBron. And if you look through some of his early game logs last season, like 16, 5 and 4 on opening night against Minnesota. That Phoenix game in Phoenix, remember, he barely extended his double-digit streak, had 11 points, got that 3 late midway through the fourth quarter, I believe, had 11, 5 and 8 in that game. You go to mid-November, has a 19-point performance in a win against Toronto. You go to late November, has 18 in Denver, 18 versus Denver, 18 in Phoenix, 16 in San Antonio, 12 in OKC. So like LeBron, through the first month of last season, was not the same player that he was over the final few months of last season. And quickly pulling up his numbers here, last year through the first month or so of the season, he was averaging, it's funny, 22, 8, and 9. It feels like it. That's still pretty good numbers for LeBron. He obviously scored at a much higher rate the rest of the way. So he was at a higher level, to be clear, like compared to this point last season. But that was a 19 game, sample through the first like month and a half of last year compared to 5 games now. So point being, like, LeBron had a bit of a rocky start last year, at least compared to his lofty standards. And I think we have to remember that he had some poor shooting games. He had some high turnover games. He had some rough defensive games where we were questioning, can LeBron still be a top 10 guy? Can he be in that top 5 conversation? Can he be an all-NBA guy? And he quickly quelled all of those concerns in around this time last year, in that like early to December, when he took that little break following the Miami loss, that tough road trip for LA, where I believe they went 1-3 on that road trip. And from that point on, he was incredible. He was playing at an all-NBA first/second team borderline level. He was commanding the defense, and he really carried the Lakers for stretches there of late December through January into February and the Luka trade. And then obviously, took a back seat once Luka was fully integrated. So with LeBron, like, I remain cautiously optimistic that the Lakers will be able to figure it out. I will not deny that it has looked rough at times. And just looking at some of the LeBron numbers right now, with LeBron on the floor, the Lakers have the NBA's best offense, but they also have the NBA's best defense. And that's been the thing. Like, he has unlocked extra levels and layers within the offense of having LeBron playmaking out of the post for shooters and cutters, or just being that guy in the 4-on-3, 3-on-2 situations. It's way different having LeBron there than Jake LaRavia, than Gabe Vincent, than Rui Hachimura. Like, he's at an entirely different level, multiple tiers above those guys in terms of his court vision, his playmaking, his passing, etc. So it's unlocked these wrinkles within LA's offense that they didn't have before LeBron returned. At the same time, it's been a bit of a clunky fit. He has been way lower of a usage player than he probably should be. And the defense in particular has been awful. It has been abysmal. It has been terrible. It has been, pick your word, it's been bad. They have a 126 defensive rating right now with LeBron on the floor, which is almost 5 points per 100 possessions, worse than the worst defense in the NBA right now. So they cannot defend a parked car right now, and they have to figure that out. But I remain cautiously optimistic that it's been 5 games. Let's give LeBron another 5 games, maybe 5 to 10. And if we're around Christmas time or the new year and he's still struggling, he's not at the same level physically, and the Lakers it's just still kind of a clunky fit, then that's a different conversation at that point. But for now, I think if anyone in NBA history deserves the benefit of the doubt, it's LeBron James, arguably the greatest player of all time. And I think we should give that to him, at least for now. Again, it's only been 5 games. Storyline number 3 for me is Luka Doncic and Austin Reaves have been the best duo in the NBA this season. And I know it's tough to say that after last night, after the combined performance of 14 turnovers for those two guys. Luka had an awesome offensive game. I thought he had a subpar defensive game. Austin had an efficient game from a scoring perspective, but wasn't as involved, struggled with the ball pressure, and he continues to, against the OKCs and Phoenixes of the world, struggle against these quick, athletic perimeter groups that can pressure him and speed him up a bit in a negative way. So, putting that performance aside or even factoring it in, I still think that these two have been the best, not only the best backcourt in the NBA, but the best duo in the NBA, full stop. And the craziest thing to me with Luka and Austin up to this point in the season is they're averaging right now a combined 63.4 points per game, which is the most by a duo in NBA history since the 1961-62 season. So the most since the NBA-ABA merger, but the most, I believe it was Wilt Chamberlain and someone else that season, and then Jerry West and Elgin Baylor. So we're going on nearly 65 years almost, just over 60 years since a duo averaged this many combined points. So quickly here, Luka's averaging 35, 9 and 9, 1.5 steals on 48, 34, 81 shooting splits, career highs in points, free throw attempts, and 2-point percentage. Austin's averaging 28, 6 and 7, 1.2 steals per game on 52, 36, 88 shooting splits. So in the ballpark of 50, 40, 90, but not quite there. For him, it's career highs in points, rebounds, assists, field goal percentage, free throw attempts, and free throw percentage. So I mentioned it earlier, Luka is in the MVP conversation. He's at worst the number 3 candidate right now. He's having arguably the best season of his career up to this point. And he has been awesome, remarkable, incredible. Yes, the turnovers and the use, I think the minutes need to come down first and foremost. And then I think the turnovers and the usage can be a little bit better. But overall, Luka has been remarkable. And then Austin, again, last night and against OKC, those were, I think, his 2 worst games of the season. So that is something to monitor. But overall, dude's averaging 28, 6 and 7 on nearly 50, 40, 90 shooting splits. He has been a baller this season, and I think right now would earn a lot of third-team All-NBA votes, in addition to being an all-star lock. So that is like the outside of the record and just the overall team play, I think those two in particular and how they have looked together and how each of them has manned the offense when the other one has been off has been really fun to watch. And it has been, I think, the biggest positive, again, outside of the overall record and seeding right now. Storyline number 4 has been LA's shooting regression. And I mean that in a positive sense. So through the first 16 games of the season, LA was shooting 33.3% on threes, which was the 5th worst shooting percentage in the NBA on threes. They were also 26th in attempts. So by any measure, they were a bottom 5 3-point shooting team for the first 16 games of the season. Over the last 4 games, they have started to regress to the mean and are shooting 43% on threes, which is the 5th best percentage in the NBA. And they've bumped up to 20th in attempts. So we've seen a volume increase slightly, and we've seen them making a lot more threes. So this is never going to be, I think, a dominant 3-point shooting team. They're never going to be that high in attempts. I think they probably top out around league average. But the percentage could certainly be better. I don't think they're a top 5 3-point shooting team percentage wise, but based on the quality of looks that they're generating, I think they should be somewhere in that like 8 to 13, 8 to 14 range. And that will partly determine their offensive ceiling. But looking at this stretch here, Austin shooting nearly 58% on 7 attempts per game. Dalton is shooting nearly 50% on 3 attempts per game. Luka's at 44% on 10 attempts per game. Rui's at 39% on 4.5 attempts per game. And Gabe is at 39% on 4 attempts per game. So that's 5 dudes shooting the bleep out of the ball right now. The only 2 guys who have not shot the ball well from 3 are LeBron, who's at 25% over that stretch, and Jake LaRavia, who's also at 25%. So most of the rotation right now, 5 of their top 9 guys. Technically, Marcus Smart is shooting 100%, but he's only taken 1 3 over that stretch, so I'm not including that in the numbers. But like most of the rotation right now is shooting the ball well. That's not going to sustain. You're not going to have, like, they don't have a team of lasers, but they do have guys who have been somewhere around league average to above league average from 3, who have been shooting the ball poorly. I think most notably Luka and Austin, but even looking at guys like Gabe or Jake, have not, Marcus Smart have not shot the ball as well as they historically have. So I think those are some areas that that's an area that the Lakers have regressed in a positive sense, and I think will continue to regress over a larger sample size and probably stabilize as a bottom 10, like a bottom 10 to 12 team in terms of attempts. I don't think they're going to be that high in the attempts. Maybe they get to league average, but in terms of percentage, I think they should be at least league average, if not higher. Then storyline number 5 for me is the Lakers defense, and the glaring weakness right now with this roster is the defensive end. They are 18th in defense, as I mentioned at the top. That is the worst defensive rating among the top 10 teams in the NBA record-wise. The Nuggets are right above them, so the Nuggets are the closest. But most of the teams with top 10 records in the NBA right now have top 10 defenses or top 12 defenses. So the Lakers are the exception right now as the worst defense in the top 10 of the NBA record-wise. And it has been a real problem. And they've had some nice stretches that, especially with this small of a sample size or this few of games up to this point, where a game against New Orleans, a game against Milwaukee, that can really skew your defensive rating. But up to this point, in terms of the actual rotation guys, which I'll be touching on the rotation a little bit later, they have like 9 key rotation guys right now that are every night players when they're healthy. Only 2 of them have above average defensive ratings compared to like the on-off metrics. So right now it's Marcus Smart and Austin Reaves are the 2 guys that the Lakers are defending better when those 2 guys are on the floor compared to when they're off. The other 7 rotation guys, the Lakers are better when they are off the floor than on the floor. And obviously, they're not going to bench Luka and LeBron and DeAndre Ayton and Rui Hachimura. So they're playing guys who they're just objectively defending worse when they're on the floor, and that is an issue that they're going to have to figure out with, I think, some lineup and rotation adjustments. I think of note, they are defending better defense. There's offensive concerns with these guys, but they are defending better with Maxi Kleber, Jared Vanderbilt, and Dalton Connect on the floor. Those are 3 other players on the team that have had a positive impact defensively. Now with Dalton, a lot of that's garbage time. The Lakers have been a good garbage time team on both sides in terms of like their guys have tended to fare well. So I kind of want to put Dalton aside because I think when you isolate it for more of his actual minutes, they have not been as good. But Vando and Maxi have both made notable impacts on the defensive end. And that is something that I wonder, like they have defended better with Maxi on the floor and at the 5 compared to Ayton and Jackson. Now, Maxi hasn't played that much, so I think there's a little bit of noise in that, but it's just worth noting. And then Vando, of course, I think is the low-hanging fruit here. Now, the issue with Vando has been he has been the worst offensive player in terms of on-off among the rotation guys. So they're actually still a net negative with Vando on the floor, and it's because they just can't score. They have the league's worst offense when Vando plays. So that's right now the thing that they're trying to battle is like awesome defense with Vando on the floor, worst offense with Vando on the floor. Then I mentioned it, since LeBron has returned, depending on metric you look at, like you could look at Cleaning the Glass or Wowie or on NBA.com, they have LeBron on the floor. Lakers have a 120.4 defensive rating, which would rank 29th among all 30 teams. As a team right now, they are allowing the 6th highest field goal percentage. And this is the really concerning spot. They're allowing 72% at the rim right now, which is the second worst mark in the NBA. The only team worse than them at defending the rim is the Sacramento Kings, who are one of the worst defensive rosters for a team that like wanted to be competitive entering the season. I can remember that. So like, a team that's starting DeRozan and Levine and Sabonis and, is playing the guys that they're playing. That's the only team right now in the NBA worse at defending the rim, than the Lakers right now. And that's concerning. That is a real concern for this Lakers team, that like they've been middle of the pack in terms of rim frequency. So they have been able to, like, they're not, I guess when you factor in volume, they're not the second worst team in the league. But when you get to the rim against the Lakers, you're probably scoring, as we saw last night against Phoenix. And for me, if there is a fatal flaw for this group, I think if you told me, if you had a genie come here and tell me, hey, the Lakers are going to lose in the first or second round, like, what do you think the reason was that they lost? I would just say it's because they're not close to being good enough defensively. I think that's been the biggest thing. Like the turnovers, they've shown that they can take care of the ball enough at times that, yes, the turnovers are a little bit of a concern. The shooting's been a little bit of a concern, but I think those are far lesser concerns. They're still a top 5 offense right now, or top 6 offense. I'm not that concerned with that. I think they're only going to get better offensively, but the defense is a real concern. And that is the thing that I think if you tell me the Lakers losing 5 in the first round again, I think it's probably because of how bad their defense is right now. Then next storyline for me, storyline number 6, is the new rotation. So LeBron's return allowed us to see a new rotation for the first time. And JJ's gone primarily with a 9-man rotation with and without Marcus Smart, but we're going to put Marcus Smart in for now because, he obviously is a rotation player when he's available. But looking at the new rotation here, it's since LeBron's return. So it's been 6 games overall. LeBron has played in 5 of them. Austin's averaging 37 minutes per game, leading the team. Luka's at 37. LeBron's at 32. Rui's at 30. Ayton's at 27. Gabe is at 20. So Gabe has been the 6th man technically, which I had Gabe as the 9th man going into the new projected rotation, but he started a game or, one game. So that kind of inflated that a little bit, but Gabe he's led the bench in minutes several times. So Gabe right now is kind of the 6th man. Then Jake LaRavia at 19 minutes, Jackson Hayes at 18, Marcus Smart at 18. So one fully healthy, no Dalton, no Vando, no Maxey, no Adu, no Bronny. I think I understand the rotation to a degree. I think if we are ranking every player on the Lakers and their performance up to this point in the season, I think JJ's playing the best 9 players. Adu we just haven't seen enough of, so it's hard to figure out where to place him. I think Bronny would probably be last on the list for me, though I think even he has I think he's exceeded expectations. It's just, I think it's between Adu and Bronny for last right now, but I'd probably put Bronny there. And then Maxey's had a couple nice flashes, but I think he's come back down to earth the last few games and looked more like an aging big man who has dealt with multiple injuries the last few years. And then Vando and Dalton, to me, I just think the other 9 guys have been straight up better up to this point in the season. Now, the Vando thing is obviously a hot topic right now with how poorly the Lakers have defended. As I mentioned earlier, with Vando on the floor, they have the league's worst offense. So I've tried to lay this out anytime I talk about Vando, anytime I talk about JJ. JJ, when he has a choice between 2 players, he has opted to prioritize offense. He has opted to prioritize shooting and skill and spacing. Vando is a clear negative in all 4 regards, and arguably the biggest negative on the team by a decent margin in all 4 regards right now. So I think it would have to take Vando defending at like an all defense level for JJ to really change his mind. And Vando has not defended at an all defense level. I think he has not been as good as he was last year defensively. He's not been as good as he was 2 years ago defensively. So, I maybe he gets a shot here because the Lakers need to mix some things up. And I think JJ is still going to be hesitant to change the starting lineup. But I don't really see a world, barring multiple injuries, in which Vando is more than like the ninth man on this team. I know some people want him to start. I know some people want him to play a lot more. I still think in like the best realistic scenario right now for Vando is like a 10 to 12 minute a night ninth man on this team. I do not honestly see a larger role with his performance this season and with the way that JJ views the rotation, the way that JJ, like even go back to last season when the Lakers were not as deep, during the healthy portion post Luka trade, Vando was averaging 14 minutes a game. This is a deeper team with more weapons on the perimeter, better players overall, and Vando's playing worse. So you add those factors in, and it's like, I just don't see him playing more than 10 to 12 minutes. And that's being generous because he's been a DNP-CD I believe every game since LeBron returned. He might have played in one game, but I think he's been a DNP-CD every single game. So I think the writing is kind of on the wall with that situation for now. JJ was asked about it last night. He defended it, citing the lineup data. And it's true. The lineup data has been bad for Vando. So, I think that's unrealistic. And then the other thing is with Adu, JJ's consistently referred to Adu and this year being a development year for Adu. So it's like, I think if JJ continues to repeat the same thing, we should take JJ's word at face value. And I don't think we're going to go from Adu being in a developmental year as a second round rookie coming off of 8 months of recovery for a knee surgery to Adu all of a sudden like starting or being a high level bench guy on this team. I just don't think that's realistic. So there are potential answers deep in the bench. I don't know how long it's going to take JJ to get there. I don't even know if he's ever going to get there. So I think this does probably mean they have to make a move and potentially a couple moves. It might just be like a fifth starter and another bench guy. We'll see. In general, I would like to see Marcus Smart's minutes go up. One of my big, when we've been having these Rui Smart discussions, one of my big concerns was not only moving Marcus to the bench, but reducing his minutes. Now, he is dealing with the back stuff. So JJ has not indicated that the reason his minutes have gone down has been the back stuff, but maybe that is partly why. I think 18 minutes a game for Smart is far too low. Even if you are going to bring him off the bench, I think he needs to be closer to 22 to 24, 25 minutes per game. And then I think Gabe is playing too much right now. 20 minutes a game, leading the bench in minutes. My fear, to be completely honest, and this is going to lead us into the next storyline number 7 about the starting group, is that JJ might problem solve by starting Gabe. And that, if I'm ranking the way I would probably ideally rank it, I would probably go Smart 1, Laravia 2, Rui 3, Gabe 4. I'm a little nervous that Gabe is going to leapfrog Marcus and Jake and potentially Rui and be the starter, but we'll see how that shakes out. I think for now, JJ is probably going to lean on the starting group moving forward, but the starting group has not been good, which leads me to storyline number 7, which is the starting lineup is not working. The Lakers have a -9 net rating with this starting group, and 3 of the 4 games they played together have been against lottery teams. So it's like they have had the easiest runway to get this starting group clicking, to get the numbers positive, to be dominating teams, to be having a double-digit net rating, the way that Denver and Houston and OKC all have with their starting groups. It's been the exact opposite. This starting group is getting ran off the floor, and it has been bad. I'm looking at, because Luka and Austin are the 2 best players on the team at this point right now, have been the 2 best players up to this point in the season, and they're not coming off the bench. The Lakers are not changing that. So if we look at like those 2 guys are locked in, and it's like, what are the other movable pieces here? You got to look at the front court of Ayton, LeBron, and Rui and how bad they've been together defensively. Depending on where you look, NBA.com, Cleaning the Glass, or NBA Wowie, they have somewhere between a 126 to 130 defensive rating, which depending on, again, the number you see, that's somewhere between 4 to 8 points worse per 100 possessions than the 30th ranked defense in the NBA. So the Lakers are defending at just an atrocious level right now with that starting front court together. And when you look at the way that LeBron has been moving at times defensively, the lack of effort from LeBron at times defensively, the lack of urgency, you add that to the Ayton Rui combo, which was already bad defensively. That, like, this has been something I've been talking about, that where the Lakers are losing the Ayton Rui minutes and losing it on the defensive end. You add LeBron to that, and I made this point last night. It's just like adding kerosene to the situation where it has become a flaming disaster on the defensive end with those three together, where they're not rotating, they're not boxing out, they're not getting back in transition, and they're not covering up for some of the perimeter limitations with Luka and Austin as your perimeter point of attack or like wing guys. And so again, 126, 128, or 130 defensive rating, depending on where you look. All three numbers are bad. Net rating ranges from -3 to -8. Also bad. And again, factoring the competition, that's even more concerning. Like if they over these past few games with LeBron, if they played Houston and Denver and OKC, I think these numbers would be like 140 defensive rating. Like it would be at an entirely different level how bad their performance has been. So we're going to have the same conversation we've had a million times already. This is no knock on Rui, but Rui is clearly the fifth option in the starting group. He has had single-digit shot attempts in 4 of the 5 games LeBron has played in, and he's clearly the fifth best starter. DeAndre Ayton has been better than Rui up to this point in the season. So I think that the clear move here has to be splitting up that trio. And I frankly, I think they should be split up like almost entirely. I don't think they should play much together, if at all, but that's kind of hard to do. So I think there will inevitably be times where they play a little bit together, but I think Rui has to move to the bench. And the reason being, I think the Lakers need a much better perimeter defender there and a dirty work guy. They need an energy guy and a dirty work guy. And for as good as Rui is overall, and as clear as his strengths are offensively, Rui is not he's a net negative defender. He's actually been arguably the most detrimental defender in the rotation in terms of on-off defense. And he's not a dirty work guy in terms of bringing a certain energy and verve and tenacity to the lineup. So if I think the Lakers have 4 guys locked in Ayton, LeBron, Austin, and Luka, it's like, what do you need with that fifth guy? You need someone who's going to defend multiple positions. You need someone who's going to dive on the ground for loose balls. You need someone who's going to play with energy and be a Dylan Brooks type or a Marcus Smart type. So I think that's the area right now that the Lakers need to address. That player's probably not on the roster, to be completely honest. And we've talked about Herb Jones and Andrew Wiggins and Dylan Brooks and whatnot. But I think the Lakers are in a tough spot here because I don't know who should start. I thought it should be Marcus Smart. I still probably think it's Marcus Smart in an ideal world, but Marcus Smart's injured. Marcus Smart's dealing with a back injury. And if you take Marcus Smart out of the conversation and now it becomes Jake LaRavia versus Gabe Vincent, I would start Jake just because of the size. And I think he's overall been a better defender than Gabe. But based on the way JJ's ran the rotation, it seems like Gabe would start. So if you're going from starting Rui to starting Gabe, sure, Gabe's a better defender, but you're losing a lot of size. I think you are adding in a player who I don't think quite fits what the starting lineup needs offensively. And I don't think that's necessarily going to improve the starting group. So I'm not sure what the Lakers do. I think we can acknowledge that this is a problem, and I think it's a clear problem. I don't have the answer. I think the answer would be ideally Marcus Smart is healthy and he can play up until they make a trade. But if they're going to keep running out this lineup, I think they're going to keep struggling defensively. And it's been pretty much every game they've played, which has been a couple games against Utah, a game against Dallas, and a game against Phoenix. Not like none of those teams are top 10 offenses. A couple of them are slightly below average. I mean, above average or Utah's below average now, but Phoenix is slightly above average. Utah's an average-ish offense. And then Dallas was the 30th ranked offense. So the fact that they couldn't guard Dallas, and yes, they added AD and they're not as bad as the 30th ranked offense. They just beat Dallas. I mean, they just beat Denver and Denver last night. Still, the Lakers have had a cupcake schedule with their starting group and they've been bad. So that's my thing right now is like the starting group. I am concerned with that. And I do think they need to make a change. Storyline number 8 is some lineup data here. Wanted to go through. So mention some of the stuff with the starters. If you look at pulling up the Lakers lineup data right now. So this is something I noticed last night, that if you actually look at 8 of the Lakers' top 11 lineups in terms of minutes. So I'm not talking about like performance. We're just purely talking minutes here. 8 of the Lakers' top 11 lineups have negative net ratings. That is a problem. So the lineup that has done the best up to this point is DeAndre Ayton, Rui Hachimura, Luka Doncic, Marcus Smart, Austin Reaves. That's the previous starting group before LeBron returned. They had a plus 13.6 net rating in 76 minutes. So these are relatively small minute samples, but that's all we have to work on. And I'm not making any sweeping observations off like the 5-man lineups necessarily. I do think the starting group, again, the early returns have been very negative, but just going through some of the lineups here. Ayton, Luka, Rui, Jake, Marcus. So this is Jake in there for Austin, minus 12.5 in 52 minutes. Then we get to the current starters, minus 9 in 49 minutes. You get to Ayton, Luka, Rui, Gabe, Austin. So this is Gabe in place of Marcus. That's a minus 4. Shooting the ball, scoring the ball really well, but defending really poorly. So in terms of the top 11 lineups, the ones that have done the best, you start with that previous starting group. Then you get to a group here. This is a bench-centric group, or sort of. Jackson, Rui, Luka, Marcus, Austin. So it's Jackson in place of DeAndre and then the previous starting group. That's a plus 31.5. Then you also have a group here with Ayton, Luka, Rui, Austin, and Jake. So Jake in place of Marcus, that's plus 19.1. So there have been some combinations and variations that have worked, but for the most part, most of the Lakers, despite having a positive net rating, despite being one of the best offenses in the NBA, and despite having a winning record, a lot of their lineups have been operating poorly. And granted, a lot of these are relatively small minute totals, but I do think a larger observation here is like, I think there needs to be some larger changes to the rotation and the lineups. And JJ mentioned after last night that he is going to make some changes, but I don't know what those are going to be necessarily. I think it could be some more Gabe, whether it's him starting or just playing more off the bench. Marcus, we don't yet know if he's going to play on the road trip yet, but clearly like a lot of the primary rotation has not been working from a performance perspective. One of the other things I was looking at was the combination of, this is why I think Rui and DeAndre should probably be split up. In particular, with Rui and Ayton on the floor, Lakers have a 121 defensive rating, minus 0.5 net rating. So 121 would be right there for worst in the NBA. Rui on, DeAndre off, 110.5 defensive rating, awesome defensive rating. Right there in like that top, close to the top 5 defensive rating. Ayton on, Rui off, 107 defensive rating, which would be second best in the NBA behind only OKC. And then actually both of them off 116.6. So it's better than the Lakers average according to Wowie, but overall not really a great number there. So point being, I think Ayton and Rui together, it has not worked. When one is on and the other is off, it has worked much better. So I think that's a pairing that I think their collective attention to detail and urgency and sometimes motor can be problematic. And I just don't think that's a pairing that has worked. And for those, I've already seen some people send Austin to the bench, split up the Austin-Luka pairing. With Austin and Luka on the floor, the Lakers have a 125 offensive rating, which is incredible, and a 113 defensive rating, which is almost 3 points per 100 possessions better than their average. They have a plus 12 net rating with Luka and Austin on the floor. So they're blowing people out with Luka and Austin on the floor. With just Austin on, they're plus 4.1. With just Luka on, they're plus 3.3. So when just at least one of those guys is on the floor, they've been positive, but with both on, they're dominating people. So that is not something that I think needs to change. And then looking at adding Marcus into that, with Marcus, Luka, and Austin on the floor, plus 33 net rating, whereas you put Rui there, and this is like for like a perimeter kind of look, it's plus 9. So still solid with Rui in there with those two, but you add in Marcus and it just goes to a different level. So again, I continue to say I think Marcus should be the 5th guy, but if he's not healthy, then, you know, I guess if we look at it quickly, Luka, Austin, and Jake is plus 16. So that is in between Marcus and Rui. And then Luka, Austin, and Gabe is minus 1.2. So that's the only one of those 4 potential combinations for the starters that is a negative, and I think should not happen. And that's why I ranked it. I ranked it Marcus, Jake, Rui, and Gabe 4th without really looking at the data. And at least up to this point, the data backs it up of those are the best options in order in terms of performance. Last couple storylines before we get into the Q&A. Storyline number 9 is the Lakers have a shot to win their 2nd NBA Cup in 3 seasons. So the Lakers dominated group play, went 4-0, had the 2nd best record in the West behind just OKC, who, technically the same record, but the point differential, OKC was like a plus 75 in their group. The Lakers will host the Spurs on December 10th. The Spurs could have a full squad with Wemby and Stephon Castle expected to be back around then. It'll be a rematch of that classic game that they had in early November that went down to the wire. Remember, I think there were 66 combined fouls in that game. A billion, or it was fouls or free throws. 66. No, I think it was fouls, and then the free throws might have been like the 70s or 80s. So a real slugfest between those two teams, but might be the Lakers' best win of the season, especially when we factor in like overall team performance. The Spurs are a really good team, and that was a really good win. So a nice rematch opportunity for LA there. And then if they win or lose, they get a rematch opportunity with OKC or Phoenix, depending on how that matchup plays out. So the Lakers are, I think, in a good spot to probably at least make the semifinal. I think if they do play OKC in the semifinal, they probably lose. But to me, it's a matter of, is it a close game or do they get blown out again? And is there real progress in the OKC matchup? But either way, I think they're set up nicely to have another deep run in the NBA Cup. And I think it's going back, a couple years ago, obviously they won and then they had that skid, but I thought it was a good momentum thing for them, at least up to that point in the season. I think it's been the same thing this season. So I wanted to highlight the NBA Cup and LA's success up to this point and how I think that has helped galvanize this group, especially before LeBron returned. And then the final storyline here is a look ahead to, I think, a really testy and tough rest of the month, particularly looking at this road trip at Toronto, at Boston, at Philly. There are playing styles and all-star players and perimeter guys who are really going to test the Lakers in these 3 upcoming road games. Like Toronto is one of the best defenses in the NBA. They play fast. They have multiple ball handlers who can attack you off the dribble so they can mismatch hunt. And they just have a really good defense that I think they're not at the OKC or Phoenix level of causing turnovers and causing havoc on that end, but they can mimic some of that. So I think it's going to be a nice test to see how LA bounces back with a couple of days of rest and preparation. But then they get the back-to-back against Boston, who's a top 5 offense in the NBA, and I think is really going to test the Lakers' defense in that regard. Shoots a bunch of threes. Lakers' three-point defense hasn't been good. So that's going, like Jaylen Brown's playing at an all-star level, potentially a third-team All-NBA level, or at least in the mix. So that's going to be a real test for LA's defense. Then you got Philly, who has maybe the player in the league who I'm like most concerned with how the Lakers would guard him in Tyrese Maxey, who's just a human blur right now and is hitting pull-up threes from 30 feet, is snaking pick and rolls and just darting by players. And I don't know who is going to guard him on the Lakers. I think he's probably going to drop I would set the over under at like 36.5, and that might be a little low. I think he's going to torch the Lakers. Now it just depends what the rest of Philly's able to do. Then again, after that, NBA Cup matchups with San Antonio and then OKC or Phoenix. So the next 5 games, and if you want to include the Phoenix game being part of this stretch, really this 6-game stretch is going to be insightful for how real was some of the stuff we saw with the Lakers earlier in the season, during this win streak, during their hot start, during their impressive start. How real was it, and how do they fare against above 500 teams? Because they're about to go on this stretch here of all above 500 teams. And up to this point in the season, the Lakers are 11-1 against teams below 500. They are 4-4 against teams above 500. So this is a real test here of that could swing and go to, with 5 more games, that could be 7-6 or 8-5, or it could go the other way in terms of their record against 500 and above teams, where that goes to, 6-7 or 5-8. And so that'll really show, like, if they're 5-8 after the end of this stretch, that's a sign that maybe they aren't as good as we think. But I do think they're going to bounce back here over the next few games. I think they're going to look more like the team we have seen over the first 20 games and really 19 if we knock out the Suns game. But this upcoming stretch to me will inform which players fit, which players don't fit, how competitive the Lakers are truly going to be this season, especially against the top half of the league, and whether they should make a trade as we approach trade season, which by the next 10-game stretch, that will firmly take us into trade season. So that'll be one of the things we're talking about then. But without further ado, appreciate you all for your patience with the Q&A. Let's get into it here. First one from Brandon. Thank you for the super chat. Gabe is too small. No more Gabe minutes. Rui doesn't rebound and is useless when he's not hitting shots. Need some Vando or Adu minutes. Get some young legs out there who can defend, rebound, and bring energy. I'm sorry to inform you that I do not think the Gabe minutes are going away anytime soon. As I laid out a couple times earlier in the show, I think there's a chance he might end up being the 5th starter at some point here. I think if you read the tea leaves, like, he's a guy that JJ really trusts, and it seems like he's above Jake in the rotation, at least right now. And he's actually been above Marcus when looking at the games that they both have played since LeBron came back. So might kind of be a Rui or Gabe conversation. And those are the two guys you just highlighted for their lowlights. With Rui, again, I continue to say, like, I think Rui's a good player, and I think he's a good offensive player. He just is being asked to do things he does not do well. He is not a good rebounder. He is not a good defender. He is not an energy guy who brings this, like, force to the lineup. And that's okay, because he's still a good player within the things he does. It's the issue is what the Lakers need from that 5th spot. I just don't think Rui's capable of doing it. So to your point, like, when he's not making shots, there is a fair question of, outside of maybe gravity, what is he doing? Because he's not rebounding the ball at a high level. He's not defending at a high level, and he's not, running the offense or, like, creating shots for other players at a high level. So if he isn't involved in the offense and he isn't making shots or even getting shots up, that does limit Rui's overall value. So that's where I do think Gabe should play less, and I think Rui should move to the bench and play less. But I don't know if JJ views it that way. And then in terms of Vando or Adu, I agree that I would like to see one of them get at least a shot as, like, the 9th or 10th man. I'm firmly with you there. I just think based on everything JJ has said and his actions, I don't know that that's necessarily going to happen. I do think if it happens, it'll probably be another shot for Vando, but the coaching staff has had a pretty short leash with him. They seem to really dislike some of the mistakes he makes. I think we really saw that on that last road trip. And at this point, I think the change you're talking about might have to come in the form of a trade. The next one from Keon Park. Thank you for the super chat. Braun looked like he had no athleticism. Like, dude, he didn't even play back-to-back during the game. JJ called Braun to help Luka, but he wasn't listening and was talking to opponent's bench like he didn't care. So let's get into the little Braun bench thing. I saw the clip that everyone's been talking about, and I fully acknowledge it's not a good look. And JJ was calling him to move for a certain action. Braun was getting into it with the bench, and he, JJ had to call a timeout and was clearly like visibly upset with LeBron. At the same time, from my vantage point, and I was in different seats. So I'm usually on the Lakers bench side. This time I was on the Suns bench side. So I saw LeBron, and again, the other clip like changes the viewpoint, but my interpretation actually was that LeBron was getting into it with someone on the Suns bench, and like the part that they don't show in the full clip, or at least the clip that's out there, is there's it goes into the timeout where LeBron is over there. It was not just like the possession on the floor. And there's a moment there where the Suns like players start to converge around LeBron. And I thought they were like, I didn't think they were going to like jump him or anything, but I thought it was about to get like physical or just one of the like hold me back situations. And what was unclear to me was like who LeBron was talking to. I was like, there's a moment, later on, he was talking to the bench again, and it looked like it was either Devin Booker or Jalen Green. So I was like, maybe it was one of those guys. Clearly, based on the clip, he was talking to Jordan Goodwin. But I thought it was actually more contentious in the moment, at least during the timeout, because Lakers security had to come over and like pull LeBron out of the whole situation and bring him to the bench. So I think that I think Arash Markazi and Mark Medina both tweeted about it. I was going to tweet it, and then I was like, I didn't take a video of it. So I feel like this is just starting something to get some attention that I don't really want to get some attention off of. But my interpretation in the moment was actually, it was a more contentious situation where someone said something on the Suns bench to LeBron. He didn't like it, and he stayed over there. And now maybe two things can be true, where he was kind of just shooting the shit and chatting with Goodwin and sort of not taking things seriously at that moment. JJ gets upset, calls timeout, and then maybe Dylan Brooks or someone else on the Suns bench says something to him. Then that escalates the situation, because all it takes is one comment for someone to get into something, right? Like that's how these things work. So, but I do want to note, like I saw the clip, and I do think it looks bad, and I don't like, there's really no way to justify it. However, I would say like later, I do think it got a little feisty there, a little heated between LeBron and the Suns bench. And I think that's something that people have not really acknowledged. But to your point, he did look old last night. Like there's no way around it. I think that's probably the reality of a 41-year-old coming off of the absence that he had. But I want to give LeBron more time. Again, it's been 5 games. Let's see where he's at later in the month. And if he looks the same later in the month, then again, that's a different conversation. And we do have to talk about what LeBron's role ultimately is on this team. But LeBron has been written off before countless times, and I don't want to write him off yet. I think we're far too premature for that. Sam Eaton first says, so why would JJ be so mad then? Well, so the point I'm making is I think he might have been doing that at the time JJ called the timeout. It might have been him just kind of shooting the shit with the Suns bench or with Jordan Goodwin in particular. So I'm not absolving the criticism that he's faced. What I'm saying is it did change from that point to actually a more heated situation with LeBron and the Suns bench immediately after that. So what I'm saying is I don't know. I saw someone, Mo Love here, saying that Denzel's famous for laughing while cussing people out. I don't know what was going on with that dynamic, but my slight pushback is I'm just saying people act like he did not care about the game and he was just like kind of messing with the bench and having this laugh and whatnot. And that is true in the clip. But my point is, like, immediately after that, when they cut to the actual timeout and it's not the part that's being televised, LeBron and the Suns bench were actually like getting into it, and the Suns were converging around him. Lakers security had to come over from their bench. That's the part I'm talking about. So I'm not saying he was not paying attention to what JJ was calling and was not fully locked in. That clearly is the way it looks on camera. So like, I'm not going to deny that. I'm just saying, I don't know if he was already getting into it with someone or if it just then escalated after then. But either way, I think that's not the reason the Lakers lost the game, because LeBron was talking to the Suns bench for a possession. Chris says, let's talk about what actually matters. How are we going to get Herb Jones? Yeah, I mean, it depends if he's even available, right? I don't think we have clarity on that yet. I think the Zion situation does increase the likelihood that Herb is ultimately available. It just comes down to if they view him as a core piece or, a core part of their team moving forward. I think my question for the chat is if it's Rui first and Adu, would you do that? Because I think that's probably the most realistic, like, big offer the Lakers could make. And that might be what it takes to get a guy of Herb's caliber. Would you do that? So I see Hands of Stone says no. And then Mo Love says yes. But I think it might cost something like that. I think, we've talked about Rui in a first, like that I think is honestly the minimum. I don't think you're going any lower than that. You're probably throwing Dalton or Adu in. Maybe you're throwing in a second round pick. Like, I think that's probably the floor right now for the price of Herb. See, Julia says yes. And Master says yes. Big yes. Dylan says he'd do it. Turbo says no. MJ says yes. Alma says yes. Then Mistra says, let's see where Giannis goes first, just in case. So that is something hanging over this whole situation, is what happens with Giannis. And I contend that I think he's probably, if he leaves, and I think that's a big if right now, he's probably going east and probably going to the Knicks, but we shall see. Chris says, we really need to get to do some minutes and make that possible while keeping Rui. My thing here is, like, I'm with you, and I feel like the Lakers missed a really critical opportunity to try to get Adu some minutes during this stretch, because when you're playing Utah and you're playing the Clippers and you're playing Dallas, you could probably afford, you're playing New Orleans, you could probably afford to get Adu out there and just get him a couple of, like, 2 4 to 5 minute shifts, like one in each half, and just see what you got for 8 to 10 minutes with him. And I guarantee you, having Adu in there for a little less Gabe or a little less Jake LaRavia would not have affected or impacted the Lakers winning a couple of these games that they just won during the 7-game win streak. So it's like, now the challenge is, okay, you want to throw Adu in there, or you want to throw in Vando, who is cold in the sense of, like, not having played in multiple games. You're doing it against much tougher competition. And so I feel like they kind of botched this, like, past couple of weeks of a relatively easy schedule that they were winning a lot of those games anyway. Like, why not see what you have in Adu? Instead, they just decide, like, JJ played a tighter rotation. He only played 9 guys. He played the starters very heavy minutes. And now they're in a situation where if they do decide to play Adu, they are kind of throwing him to the wolves, so to speak, in terms of just playing him in, like, higher stakes games against better opponents. And maybe he rises to the occasion and he looks great and he earns a permanent spot. But I think based on the competition and based on how the way the Lakers have been playing, I feel like JJ is actually going to go with, like, a tighter rotation or leaning into the top 8, top 9 more, rather than expanding it or trying something new. Now, maybe they drop a couple more games here. Maybe they go 1-2 on the trip, and all of a sudden coming back for the NBA Cup game, JJ makes some bigger changes. But for now, I'm hesitant, or I'm skeptical that JJ is going to go from viewing Adu as a developmental player to a rotation guy off of, like, just one loss. It was certainly a discouraging and alarming loss, but I don't know if that's going to change how JJ views it. Kane Carter, Jovan, would you do Rui for Grayson Allen? Is that realistic? I would not. I think Grayson is better defensively than Rui, but I think he's a slightly overrated defender. Like, I think depending on the matchup, he ranges from slightly below average to slightly above average, but it's really matchup based. But I don't think Grayson, like, Rui's a better shooter than Grayson. Grayson's probably a better high volume shooter, which is important. But like, Rui's actual shooting percentage has been better. I think he's a better. I mean, Grayson's averaging 18 and a half a game, and he has developed as a ball handler and off the dribble scorer to a degree that I think is impressive. But I like the way that Rui complements the starters and Luka and Austin better overall offensively. And I do think Grayson's a better defender and tries harder and is more locked in on that end. I don't think he's enough of an upgrade over Rui to give up Rui. So I would say no to that. Two End Master says that, can we do DK and Rui instead? Is that possible? I'm assuming this is for Herb Jones. I don't know yet. I don't even know if Herb Jones is available. I just think reading the tea leaves, New Orleans is going to probably have to start giving up some of these guys. And I don't see a lot of people clamoring for Jordan Poole or, why am I blanking on? DeJounte Murray. Like, even Zion. I don't know what Zion's market's going to look like. I think the sweet spot of like guy who actually has value, who might not fit into the long-term plans for New Orleans, might be Herb Jones. So, but I think the price is going to be high. Jay Spares, thank you for the super chat. Braun will be fine. He looked like this for the first month last year. Need a trade for athleticism, and Luka needs to get his team more involved. His usage is the highest in the league. Team needs touches. So Jay is mentioning that, like I said earlier in the show, and I said last night, Braun had that first month where he was rough. I think more so defensively than his numbers, because as I actually go through the numbers are better than I thought, though he did have some individual performances where, the game against Phoenix where he barely got to 11, opening that against Minnesota. Like, he was not an all NBA guy every single night to start last season the way that he was for basically the final 2/3 of the season. So LeBron sometimes needs a little bit of a ramp up, and that's okay when you're 40 or 41. Like, that's understandable. And the Lakers have built a cushion in the standings to where they can be okay with that. But certainly I agree that the athleticism is a clear need for this roster, and it might have to be more than just one player. It might be a couple, although maybe they ultimately settle on a Adu or Vando as more athletic pieces. And then I agree with DeLuca getting, like, I think the tricky part, I do understand the theory and do support the theory with Luka getting going early, because I think we have seen, especially in like recently, just against like Dallas and the Clippers, those two teams had to contort their defense and sell out in a way that ultimately compromised them. And then that's what got the 4-on-3, 3-on-2s, got the other guys involved. Phoenix actually played a more conservative scheme where it was really like high, like in rewatching it, like it was really high level stuff from Phoenix. I think their game plan was incredible. And I thought the cat and mouse game that they played in the pick and roll, where they were almost funneling Luka into the mid range and into the paint, but then leveraging Mark Williams' giant frame and wingspan and rim protection, and then also collapsing on those dump off passes. And it takes a certain level of defensive IQ, but also speed and athleticism and urgency to execute the type of scheme that Phoenix did. And they did it at a really high level, and they did it with a pretty deep rotation. So kudos to them. Like, it was a really high level defensive game plan. But to your point, I think there's a balance, right? Where Luka can still Luka can sleepwalk into 15 points in a quarter, especially the first quarter, and it still be a positive quarter for the Lakers and other guys get involved. But in general, the Lakers have been a bad first quarter team, which I think is largely the starting group, but that's a whole other topic that I've touched on a million times. But I think Luka can sometimes, because scoring can be so effortless for him, and he is such an elite 3-level scorer, he can sometimes get, and again, I think Phoenix was trying to cajole him into doing this. He can get caught in I can just beat this dude. I'm going to get an easy shot. And he kind of can get a little wrapped up in it and then not be playmaking as much. And then I think it's a little bit out of balance. I think the proper balance is probably a 15-point, 5-assist first quarter for Luka, 4 or 5 assists and 15 points. That's a great Luka first quarter. When it gets tilted to 20 points and 1 assist, that's where I think the balance is a little bit out of whack for his high usage first quarters. So I agree with you. I think the usage needs to come down, and it should probably go to LeBron ideally, and Rui as well, as a more involved player. But certainly, I mean, last night he had a 48% usage for the game, which is far too much. But again, that was partly the Phoenix game plan. Phoenix wanted that. They invited that, and it worked. Vin says, what if we trade Austin for a player like Giannis, but in next free agency, Austin re-signs with us again? Is it realistic to happen? There is a moratorium on when guys can be traded or re-sign after they've been traded. I forget if it's like 6 months or something, or it might even be a full season. I forgot. Like Derek Fisher had that situation pop up, I think with OKC or Utah or something late in his career. And then I think it was OKC. The issue here would be the Lakers aren't going to have the cap. If they trade for Giannis, if at the deadline or at some point here before the deadline, they trade Austin for Giannis, they're not going to have the cap space to then turn around and give Austin 40 plus million. So I don't even think it's legal, but even if it were legal, I don't think they have the money to go do it. So if they commit to the Luka Giannis, that's a great thing to commit to. It's 2 top 4 players. They're not going to have the cap space for Austin. White Falcon, thoughts on JJ not going deeper into the young guys? Well, I think that he gave Dalton a shot. I think like Dalton to me has gotten. I still don't even fully understand or agree with Dalton being in the rotation right now above Vando, for example. Like, sure, from a shooting offense perspective versus Vando's offense, I get that. But like the Lakers need more defense and athleticism. And I think between those two, I'd rather just play Vando. So, with Dalton and Bronny, I think have had some opportunities. And I think at this point, both guys are not rotation guys, which is fine. They're second year players on a team with championship aspirations. Most second year players on teams with championship aspirations are not high level players unless you're a lottery pick. So that's, there are exceptions, of course. Like AJ Mitchell is a great example of a second round guy who is now playing a lot for or I forget if he was late first or second, but second year player who is playing a lot for OKC, but I believe he was second round. For the most part, those types of guys are not playing on contenders. Adu is a tricky one just because he's a second round pick who's a rookie coming off 8 months of rehab and recovery for his knee. So I get JJ not immediately inserting him. That said, I don't like JJ putting a label on Adu that this is a developmental year. Like I feel like you shouldn't put that type of ceiling on a player and should just, hey, if Adu's your 9th best player, Adu should play, regardless of if you view this as a developmental year. And I think even if JJ is putting that like that's probably diffusing the pressure on Adu to be like, hey, we're not expecting much from this guy. We just want to develop him. And then if he exceeds expectations, that's a different story. But I would say like really the 3 young guys that we're talking about here are Bronny, Dalton, and Adu. Bronny, I think at this point is not a rotation player yet. Dalton, I think could maybe be a rotation player on a different team, but on a team that's this defensively challenged, I think he just plays far too much into their weaknesses. And Adu, I just don't think we have the sample size yet, but based on at least what JJ said, it doesn't seem like he's going to play that much. So I would like to see it more, but at the same time, for a team, there's a reason why young players typically don't play that much on contenders. And I don't think any of those guys is like incredible to the point that they have to be on the floor. Now, Adu is so remarkable with his athleticism that maybe that can check a lot of the boxes of what the Lakers need. But I think that's a little premature to just say like a second round pick coming off of the time he's missed should be a rotation player. At the same time, I'd like to just see it. Let's just see it for a couple games. And then if Adu does not perform well or he just doesn't work, then you move on. But that's what the regular season is for. Jordan, thank you for the super chat. I think DK being included in a trade would be a mutual benefit. I think DK can improve on a bad team like MPJ with the Nets. Plus, I want to see Adu. I agree. I got asked, for those of you who are on Threads, I've been more active on Threads lately, and I did a Q&A a couple days ago, and someone asked, like, which Lakers do you feel like need a change of scenery the most? And the two I said were Dalton and Vando. I think Dalton, like, I think the Charlotte trade, I know from the Lakers side, I think the Charlotte trade worked out, and you'd probably rather have DeAndre Ayton than Mark Williams. But I think from Dalton's side, the Charlotte trade not being rescinded is a bad thing for him. I think he would have been much better in Charlotte. Now, with Khan coming in there and dominating the way that he has, and probably being the Rookie of the Year favorite, like, it might have rained on Dalton's parade a little bit there. But I think Dalton needs to go to a small market lottery team like a Charlotte, for going through the standings here. Like Washington's technically not a small market, but like a Washington, I'm going to contradict myself here again with Brooklyn is not a small market, but like either a small market team or a team with a small media presence that isn't going to be living and to quote a former head coach, living and dying with every game and every possession. Like I think one of those teams, or a New Orleans or a Sacramento or a Utah, like if Dalton went to one of those situations, I think he'd be in a much better spot with less pressure, less eyeballs, less scrutiny, less attention, all that stuff. And I think it would allow Dalton to thrive in a lower stakes environment. And I agree with Adu. It's just, I don't know if it's going to happen. Making sure. I got a couple more super chats before I wrap. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. Do the Lakers need to say first we are trading Rui, Gabe, Maxey, and DK only, or just listen to what they want and then find the middle point? I assume you're saying in general. I would more so say the latter. Like, teams are, the funny thing is when people report this team has talked to this team, like, teams are talking all the time. They're always on the phone. They're always texting. They are always having conversations. And it's almost, on a much higher stakes scale, it is like fantasy football, right? Or whatever fantasy sport you play, where I can just speak for myself here. With my fantasy football team, I have my 2 to 4 players who are untouchable. That on this team is Luka, right? Like, Luka's the untouchable. The Lakers are not trading Luka, unless they hire Nico Harrison as their president of basketball operations. They are not trading Luka under any circumstances. So that's like your first, second round picks in fantasy. Then you have the next set of guys who, like, you don't want to trade, but you'd have to, like, blown away with an offer. That's probably like in Austin, where if you could get Giannis, you think about trading Austin. If it's just about anybody else, or like not a top 10 guy, you're probably not trading Austin Reaves. Then you get your other, next level of like a DeAndre Ayton, where maybe there are some trades that could make sense for an Ayton, but he's on such a value contract and he is such an important piece of your team as a starting center, that it's hard to replace him. So that's maybe like you had a sleeper tight end who popped, and you're like, sure, I could use another running back or wide receiver, but I don't want to lose this tight end because the tight end spot is so important on a fantasy lineup. So point being, I think that the key is, like, they're having conversations all the time. They are, of course, there's some like gamesmanship and some playing coy, and this guy's not available, this guy is available. But in general, teams, and this is how this information gets out, like, opposing teams know which Lakers players are available, which Lakers players aren't available. And that's where you get the intel of, okay, they got a few expirings that they'd be potentially open to trade. They got a couple interesting young guys in Dalton and Adu. They got the 1 first, the 1 second, multiple swaps. Like, these are the realistic trade assets. So what the Lakers do is they, just like every other team, they scour the market, they have conversations, and then that's also where a price like the Miami price, which I reported over the summer, gets out of what Miami wants for Wiggins. A starting point is Rui, Dalton, and a first. And that comes out, and then you see the reaction to it, where Miami fans are like, that's not enough. Lakers fans are like, that's too much. And, sometimes these things leak just to honestly see the reaction to it, because one of the sides wants to just get, some reaction from their fan base or just the public. So I think for the Lakers, like to your point here with who's available, I think all those guys are available depending on the price. It just depends what the price ultimately is. Like I would put Rui in a different group where I think the price to get off Gabe, Maxey, and Dalton for the Lakers in terms of them willing to part with those guys is much lower, or the threshold rather is much lower than Rui. The Lakers, I think, like give them truth serum, they do not want to trade Rui. But I think if there was a deal that made sense where they had to include him, I think they probably would. It's just, I think that the bar to trade him is going to be higher than maybe the average fan would want it to be. Twinception, thank you for the super chat. Feel bad for Rui. Still believe he's an X factor. The bench is probably better, so he can fix the bench scoring. He barely touched the ball last game. Yeah, and it's you can think of a million analogies for Rui, but it's like, let's say you have a toolkit and you're missing a hammer, and like you could try to use some of the other tools to replace the hammer, but the way to ultimately get the project done is to get the hammer. And that's kind of what the Lakers are going through right now, where I think Rui is a good player. I think Rui is a useful player. I think Rui is a helpful player. And especially on the offensive end, he fits well. Even if he's not getting the ball as much, like he still is a net positive offensively. The issue continues to be he is a minus defender in a lineup that he is being asked to be arguably he was the primary guy on Dillon Brooks last night, and Dillon Brooks scorched him. And it's like, he is not a wing stopper. And that's the thing, is like the Lakers are using a screwdriver as a hammer, when it's like, no, you need the hammer. You need to go get the hammer. And that doesn't mean the screwdriver doesn't have value. Doesn't mean there aren't applications for the screwdriver. There's some tasks you need a screwdriver for. There's some tasks you need a hammer for. Lakers need a hammer, and right now they have a screwdriver. So they got to go get the hammer. And maybe they use, maybe there's a hammer on the bench, or maybe they got to go trade for one. But that's the best way for me to break this down. With all that said, about to go 5 more minutes here. I already went a bit over, but I do have a hard out in 5 minutes. So you guys got any more questions, let me know. Izzy says Rui is a Stanley screwdriver. This one's going over my head because I'm not a tool guy. Michael says, get the hammer, all caps. Love it. Emmy, do you think the Lakers don't trade the first round pick and wait until the summer when they have 3 to trade? I think they're going to have a high bar to trade the first round pick. So I think among some of the names we've talked about, Herb Jones is probably the only one that they would consider the first round pick for. Otherwise, I think most of the other guys are second round pick or swaps. Hamza, thank you for the super chat. Not a Lakers question. Wanted to ask you about your practice/post-game interview flow. Do you record audio/vids? Do you aim to post on socials? Is it prepping for pods? Nice question here. I always like the journalism questions. So in terms of my interview workflow has definitely changed, because when I was a beat reporter, I think there was an expectation and a bit of a pressure to like ask questions, where now I think I still feel that a little bit, but I don't like have to ask a question. Like every time when I was a beat reporter, there was like an agenda in terms of you're probably writing something off of this practice. So, agenda can have like a negative connotation, but it was more so like you need to find something to write about. So that could be either a stat that you find interesting, one side of the floor, a schematic thing, like whatever, or a piece of news. There's always news that pops up, but like you need to write something. So I'm constantly thinking about storylines and what to write, what to talk about, what to break down. So that informed a lot of my preparation for practices and post game. Is what do I want to write about? What is like the talking point, or what do I find most interesting? Now it's a little bit different because I have a bit of a different setup with the show and what I'm doing. So I'm not I don't feel that same level of like urgency or pressure to ask questions. It's more so if I'm curious about something, or if there's something I think's obvious that hasn't been asked yet. Like I really want to ask about the front court defense and just what JJ is seeing with those three players together, for example. And in terms of recording audio and videos, I usually record videos for my vlog. The one player I always record for is LeBron, and you guys know I upload the LeBron videos to YouTube. In general, I used to record audio for years. This has been the first year where it's just been nice to not record audio, and you can find it. You could get it from other people. It's on YouTube. So if I need to like listen back to something, there's ways to do that. The Lakers post, actually, they send out the audio to the media for most of the coaches and players. So I get it that way too. I do aim to post on socials. I just hired my first social editor. So he's helping pump out clips from the pod and these lives on multiple times a week. And sometimes again, I'll post LeBron videos and whatnot, or a photo or video, something that I find interesting or noteworthy. And a lot of it is prepping for the pods though. So I do listen to everything that's said post game, see if there's anything that's worth talking about. And yeah, I mean, I'm constantly thinking about, like, now I got my formula with the big picture, notable performers, stat of the night, 3 takeaways. So it's really 4 takeaways, I guess. It's like 1 big picture takeaway, 3 smaller takeaways. So every game I'm kind of watching the game through that filter of like, what's my big picture topic tonight? What are my 3 things I want to touch on that I want to make sure I hit? And then kind of grading each player individually, and then the stat to me that jumps out, or it's often multiple stats, but that's my breakdown. I will say I do prefer the current version of like not being as like locked in with having to ask a question or having to write something. I do like having some flexibility here to have more agency over my content and what I'm doing. So it's definitely like a lower ask on me, which has been nice. But I guess to go back to like being a beat reporter and how I used to do it, yes, there was always some sort of agenda or objective with each availability and trying to get some sort of question answered. So that's how, and then I would record everything, usually just audio, not video, but sometimes video clips. And then I'm always like tweeting out quotes and stuff. So that's another part of it. Ken Carter, hey, Jovan, do you think part of the problem is a lot of the targets the Lakers want are on teams that flat out don't want to help them or will try to swindle them for guys they wouldn't ask other teams for? Yes and no. I think the teams that probably won't trade with the Lakers are the Clippers, the Celtics, and the Mavericks. I don't really think there's anyone on the Celtics that makes a lot of sense for the Lakers other than maybe Derek White, but now that's probably an Austin conversation, which I don't think the Lakers would do. On the Mavericks and Clippers, there are several players. I think Chris Dunn and Derek Jones Jr. would help from the Clippers. I think Max Christie, Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington. There's multiple guys on the Mavericks that would help the Lakers. But I just don't see either of those teams trading with the Lakers. To a lesser extent, I think typically you don't trade with the top teams in your conference. So like, I don't see OKC or Houston or Denver trading with the Lakers. I probably don't see Detroit, New York, or Cleveland trading with the Lakers because they view each other as competition for contention. So you do look at like the middle to lottery level teams in both conferences as like more realistic, but there's always an element of a little bit of a Lakers tax. A little bit of people don't want to help the Lakers out, but they have established, most notably with Washington and Brooklyn and Charlotte before the rescindment, some good relationships there, some good dynamics. So I do think in general, Brooklyn and Washington tend to be the 2 teams that the Lakers trade most with. Live Free wants me to grow a mustache. You don't see. Well, this is. I actually just shaved before the pod, and this is what I look like. Julie says Hornets, no ill will there. Oh no, there's ill will there. There's ill will. Keon Park asks Pels. Yeah, Pels are another team that the Lakers. Obviously, like post AD trade, it was a little weird with David Griffin, but I think they have a solid relationship now. Then last one here, I will close it with LeGoat James. Jovan, what are the similarities and differences between this year's team and the 2020 team? I think stylistically, they're very different. I think this year's team, the blueprint for that 2020 team was dominant defense and, top 3 defense and top 12 offense. And it was sort of like, can LeBron and AD and a third or fourth offensive player, and it rotated nightly. Sometimes it was KCP, sometimes it was Kuz, sometimes it was Danny Green, sometimes it was Alex Caruso, Rondo. Like it depended on the night. That they had a rotating cast of like guys that would step up and have certain performances. But it was largely like with LeBron and AD as 2 top 5, top 6 players, you're going to have a certain floor offensively. And if they can carry you enough offensively, and then you have a bunch of dogs defensively. I think the 2020 team is one of the best defensive teams of all time with the 2 big look, JaVale, Dwight next to AD. Keith and Kuz and LeBron. And that's just the front court. We haven't talked about KCP, Danny Green, Alex Caruso, Avery Bradley, Rondo, just a bunch of dogs on that team. Defensively, you're going to be elite. That's your superpower. And then offensively, you have 2 of the top 6 players in the league that can carry a certain load offensively. This year's team is a different build. You're going to be elite offensively, and you need the defense to be just good enough collectively. Ideally, somewhere closer to top 10 to 12, but like maybe it ends up being closer to league average in an optimistic sense. I think the 2020 team is deeper. I think the 2020 team also, with the exception of Rondo and Bradley, though I would argue Bradley, I think played a little bit bigger defensively than he was just a pit bull, right? That team was giant, basically. The point I'm getting at, like outside of a couple guys in the rotation, everyone was 6'5" and above. And this year's group does have some of that, with the exception of Gabe and Marcus, although Marcus, I think, plays bigger than he is. Pretty much everyone's 6'5" or above in this rotation. So that's a similarity. I think both teams, in general, people question that. Like, remember there was this whole storyline in 2020, who's the Lakers' 3rd best player? And like, what is this? Does that matter? Who's the 3rd scorer? I think there's some elements of that with this group of after the top 3. I think NBA consensus was like the Lakers don't have a lot of depth. They don't have a lot of good players. And I think they've proven that or disproven that, similar to 2020, where they proved it didn't matter who was the 3rd guy. But I would say in terms of style, I think they're very different teams. LeBron was at a different phase of his career. I think a Luka-led team is much different than a LeBron and AD-led team, as we've seen through the years. So I would say there's more differences than similarities, but I guess the similarities I would see are like definitely a lot of top-end talent that is giving them a certain floor, and the blueprint generally being like being elite on one end of the floor and ideally being above average on the other end. And remember, in the bubble, the playoff run, LA shot the ball really well, and they were a better offense than they were in the regular season. I think like that's probably the goal for the Lakers this year. Defensively is like, can they be around average, but bump that up in the playoffs? So that would be my general, couple minute breakdown of 2020 versus 2026. But with all that said, I do have to go. I will be recording a new podcast in about 5 minutes, but appreciate you all for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I will be back on Thursday with Lakers Collective. TBD post-game, I am traveling to Boston, so I'm unclear right now if I am going to be covering Lakers Raptors yet. I might take that night off and then be back for Lakers Celtics on Friday. But either way, we'll be doing Lakers Collective in the morning on Thursday, and then potentially back later that evening for that game. So either way, I'll talk to you guys in a couple of days. And we'll also be doing a new episode of Great Western Forum. So that'll be coming out tomorrow. Keon Park asked, when is Lakers Collective? It's at 8 a.m. Pacific time on Thursday. Because I'll be on the East Coast, we are bumping the time up. But first road trip of the season for me. I'm leaving tomorrow morning for Boston. Really excited for it. There's nothing like Lakers Celtics. When I saw the schedule, that was the first game I circled. I said I have to be there for Lakers Celtics. So I'm excited to get to Boston and be out there for a few days. But appreciate you all, and I will talk to you all very soon.